Welcome to the lecture. It is really great having you here. Today, we are going to begin our discussion about the founding generation. Some may be thinking, oh yeah, those old dead white guys, but even though some scholars try to minimize their contribution, I believe that is contrary to the historical evidence. With that in mind, I feel it is important to know who these men were, and what they contributed, not only to the development of a new type of nation, but to the ideas of liberty, equality, and freedom. When I say founders, I mean Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and Thomas Paine, just to mention a few. Our brief focus today will be on Franklin and Washington, and how these men modeled behavior that we may find strange today. The behavior required to become, or to be a gentleman. Living life in a disinterested manner, serving your country, not motivated by your own self-interest. What a strange idea, right? A politician not motivated by their own self-interest. Oh, don't even get me started. What were their ideas about government and a citizen's duty? What did they mean when they used the term disinterested and gentleman? Why was George Washington seen during his lifetime as such a great man? The founders, I think, expected their leaders to be more like themselves, more or less heroic individuals with the classical kind of conception of leadership. These men did not serve in their government to make money. They were not trying to exploit their public offices for the sake of your own careers. They believed you were supposed to be devoted to the public and the common good. This is what it meant to be a statesman. But by the early 19th century, politicians, I am using that term intentionally, because they're not worthy of the title, statesman, they are politicians running for office and doing things that the founders would have found objectionable. Dealings like log rolling, horse trading, all of the things that we consider to be the staples of American politics today, were not something that the founders expected, nor anticipated. They didn't want that kind of politics. They expected people not to run, but to stand for office. They did not anticipate electoral politics as it emerged in the 19th century. They would shake their heads in disgust if they saw their country today. In their own lifetimes they began to see a transition from a classical Republican culture to a more liberal culture. This closely resembles the transition, which occurred as the aristocratic culture was transformed into a democratic one, because the classical Republican ideals depended on leaders who were disinterested, who were virtuous, who were capable of sacrificing or putting aside their private interest. As society became more democratic, the aristocratic ideals fell away, becoming unsustainable. Well, you might wonder, what exactly does disinterested mean? Well, let's see. An enlightened, civilized man was disinterested and impartial, not swayed by self-interest and self-profit. He was cosmopolitan. He stood above all local and parochial considerations and was willing to sacrifice his personal desires for the greater good of his community or his country. He was a man of reason who resisted the passions most likely to afflict great men, such as ambition and avarice. Such a liberal, enlightened gentleman avoided enthusiasms and fanaticisms of all sorts, especially those of religion. Tolerance and liberality were his watchwords. Politeness and compassion toward his fellow man were his manners. Behaving in this way was what constituted being civilized, with the ability to behave in a disinterested manner. The founders' concept of government, one that derived its power from the people, relied on leadership by a disinterested group of intellectuals who enjoyed the respect and admiration of the people. They believed an educated and moral citizenry was essential to electing leaders who would put the nation before self-interest. What none of the founders realized was how quickly and to what extent political empowerment would spread to the rank and file. Within a very short time, classical references and literary allusions were replaced by populist rhetoric geared for the common man. Respect and entitlement to public office was no longer reserved for this generation of self-made aristocratic intellectuals. You might ask, what was an aristocratic intellectual? Well, first off, it means you are a gentleman. The best example of a self-made man, aristocrat, and gentleman would be Benjamin Franklin. Now Franklin was not born a gentleman, he started out as a printer. Within time he becomes a very wealthy man. But, as long as he's still a printer, even if he's running a shop with 20 employees, he is looked down upon by the gentry, because he has to work for a living. If Franklin wants to obtain his desire to become a gentleman, he must retire. So, in 1748, at the age of 42, he retires from his business in a very elaborate kind of ceremony. He has a coming-out portrait painted. He becomes a gentleman and he never works again a day in his life. So what did he do with himself? He became a renowned scientist. He participated in public life. But he's not working as a businessman. His money is coming to him through all kinds of investments. He was very self-consciously becoming a gentleman. Now let's turn our attention to George Washington. You will be reading an essay by Gordon Wood, who does an outstanding job revealing to his readers the character of Washington, so we will discuss him for only a moment. Stories about Washington often talk about what many believe are the most significant moments of his life. One, which I believe is the most impressive and important moment, is when Washington turned his sword over to Congress at the end of the Revolutionary War. Why was that moment so significant? And why did King George III of Britain declare, if it is true and Washington had indeed turned his sword over to Congress, he would be the greatest man in the world? Who in history, what successful general had ever done such a thing? You could go back to Cincinnatus, an ancient mythical hero. But, otherwise, we go from Caesar, to Cromwell, to William of Orange, to Napoleon. All of those successful military leaders expected political rewards commensurate with their military victories. And here's Washington saying, "No, I'm leaving. I'm going back to Mount Vernon to my farm." And it just electrified the world. They couldn't believe it. How could he give up that kind of power? How does anyone give up power at the height of his success? Nobody else had done that in recent history. So, this is what George III is saying. He just can't believe that a person would give up power so easily as Washington did. Do you think it would be possible for a figure like George Washington to reappear in the American political scene? In my opinion, there's no possibility of us having a Washington. We live in a very different world. A much more democratic world than his world. It's very unlikely that anyone like him would appear again. A man of such character would never have the opportunity to get elected to a political office today. Why, you might ask? Well, I will let you ponder that for a while. So what did we cover today? We learned what it took to become a gentleman, to participate in political life as disinterested, and how they viewed this new government that was unfolding before them. We will look deeper into these topics as we move forward. Talk to you soon. Hope you all have a great week.